Sorry, David, do you need me to start over then? Okay. So call the meeting to order again. This meeting was properly noticed. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Sandy. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Reagan. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Agenda passes. No visitor comments. Next is our consent agenda. Before we ask for a motion, Michelle, was there any?
Yes, so on your accounts payable report that was emailed to you and then set in front of you, I'd just like to point out, and it is just a little bit more explanation. Okay, why can't I find it? You see it? No, it's on this report. Oh, here it is. Is on page 4, the last one, check number 23262. It's to Great Lakes Roofing Corporation. This is our last payment for the roofing company. They did damage the overhead doors. We still have not received any compensation for that, so we deducted the quote amount from overhead doors for the repairs off that check item. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
And aren't you still waiting on repairs for their work performance as well?
Yeah, we still had a couple leaks after the roof was done and it rained. So they've come out once so far. They were supposed to come out again, but have not yet. So we are still dealing with them.
Thank you.
I'll follow up with them and see what we can get the ball rolling with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. Okay, with that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And then roll call because of the money involved.
Moda,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Rule,
Aye.
Andler,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. And next on the agenda is Jody Dobson from Baker Tilly regarding our audit.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. We've gone through and completed the annual audit for the water and light utility, and I think there was probably 3 pages of graphs that were included. I'm just going to talk from those and provide some highlights of the audit process rather than going through the lengthier reports. So the first page of the graphs is the electric department results. And starting at the top, we have the rate of return, which is how the Public Service Commission establishes rates for both the electric and the water utility, is intending them to earn a rate of return on your investment in capital. So we can see here that the actual rate of return did decrease from 2021 to 2022. And when we look back, there's really 2 drivers to that. Number 1 is that operating income decreased a little bit, and number 2 is as you continue to invest in your system or have new capital additions, that increases the rate base that you're trying to earn on. So that's kind of a natural occurrence. With that, your rates were last changed in 2012. And so to be earning still, you know, when I look at the 2 years here, that kind of a rate of return is very positive. And I know that you're working on looking at rates right now. Yeah, so that makes sense. When we look at the graph in the middle here for the electric utility, we see that it really has been fairly stable margins over the last 4 years. That gap, it's hard to see on this because of the scale, but it closed a little bit in 2022, so it does make sense just kind of to look at those rates at this time. The next page has similar information for the water utility. And again, here we can see that rate of return, the actual did decrease a little bit from 4% to just under 3%. Here, the operating and maintenance costs again increased from 2021 to 2022, and then also that rate base is continuing to increase. So as we look at the graph in the middle, you can see that change a little bit more here just because of the scale that the operating expenses went up by just under $100,000 while the revenues went down by about $20,000. And that's really driven by inflationary costs. I know chemicals and power were up in 2022, and without a rate change, your revenues stay relatively stable other than minor changes with use. The water utility rates were last changed in 2019, so it's also been several years, and I think you're also looking at those right now, which is really good to monitor on an annual basis, but to do periodic change or adjustments and look at that to make sure you're staying up to date with the cost changes. The last page then looks at the combined balance sheet metrics. So the top number here we have is the unrestricted cash reserves for the combined water and electric operations. At the end of 2022, just over $1 million of unrestricted cash on hand, which is just a little over 1 month's worth of operations. Typically, the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, would say 2 to 3 months worth of operations is a good benchmark to look for. And we can see that this has been declining over the last 4 years. So again, that's just another good thing to be looking at those rates and saying, let's make sure we've got enough coming in to keep up with the bills and maintain that reserve. What that really is there for is if you have timing issues between when bills need to be paid versus when you're collecting from your customers, or if there's something unusual that were to occur. I've had utilities that have a storm where there's, large amounts of maintenance that need to be done, a large customer that has some issues and can't make bill payments right away. So that's really where your reserves come into play.
Were there any large payments at the end of the fiscal year that would have affected your or is it truly going down?
It's just the higher cost in general, power costs, because power costs are 85% of our budget, and they increased quite a bit. We didn't have any, like she said, we didn't have any customers we haven't seen any decline there.
The next two numbers then here really look at debt financing related to your infrastructure. So the first is the debt coverage, because you do have some revenue bonds outstanding. So you're required to have your revenues be able to cover the operating costs, and then 125 or 1.25 times the debt service. You're actually making over 5 times the debt service. So no concern about meeting that requirement. And the reason that is if we look at that next bar, because only about 15% of the total infrastructure is financed with outstanding debt. So that's a really low amount of overall debt outstanding, which gives you that flexibility of if you did have a large project coming, the capacity to borrow, but also then makes those reserves more important if you're trying to hold the debt down. Just a couple other things then to note related to the audit process is, we work with management to evaluate any new accounting standards that are coming out. There was one for 2022 related to leases that we evaluated and made any required changes in the financial reports for that. For 2023, we'll be looking at subscription-based information technology arrangements, which is a mouthful. Yes, SABITA. And so that's the next big one that we're looking at. The good news is the accounting is very similar to leases, so once we identify if there are any contracts that meet the definition, we'll have the accounting down. But we'll work again with management on that. Similar to prior years, we do report weakness in internal controls just related to the segregation of duties and financial reporting due to the size of the entity. nothing really that can easily make that go away, but it just to make you aware that your involvement in approval of bills and discussion of financial items is that much more important because you are that extra set of eyes. But ultimately, as we work through the audit process, any adjustments that need to be made are made, and the financial statements receive what we call a clean or an unmodified opinion. So they are a fair presentation at year end. So with that, there were no other concerns that came up during the audit that we are required to report. So.
Is it usually going over the sewer audit stuff, Karen? Or is that Crystal?
So the sewer audit has not been completed yet. This is going to be the reclassifying of the funds to then, so
Yeah.
that can be completed.
Yeah.
I have one question before I'm done.
Sure.
The internal controls, what is left that needs to be done to make that process more secure?
Really, the item related to segregation of duties is just because of the size of the staff, you can't have a complete segregation where no one person is doing 2 steps of the process. So for example, for the billing process, ideally you'd have one person who's setting up accounts, someone else who's doing billing, a separate person doing receipting, and then someone separate doing cash counts and deposits.
Right.
And that just isn't feasible. So it's, I'd say it's something that we report to the vast majority of the mid to small size governments that we work with. And it just really is more of an awareness to any time you can get additional individuals involved in the office, a second set of eyes on things. It's important, yeah, the compensating controls. So.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your time. Does anybody else have any questions for Jody?
I would just like to add with that graph showing the water utility, we will be looking into the process of maybe being able to do a simplified rate case for the water since it was done in 2019. I think we may have already exceeded a lot of time for that, but we will be taking a look at that.
Great. Do we need to make a motion to accept it or no? Okay. All right, then we will move on to the reclassification of wastewater designated funds from restricted to unrestricted.
So I'll just start off by saying that this was found in the current audit that's taken place. We're just looking for reclassification of some restricted funds. This isn't because of current staff situation that this is in place right now or it's being affected. I think there's been a lot of transition in staff of not knowing where some of these funds should have been allocated. And because of that, we're seeing a general deficit. I have Crystal here and both Jody. I asked them both to stay to give you some more input if necessary. But if Crystal, you want to add to that topic?
Yeah, just to clarify one of your statements, the classifications, everything is in its right place. What we're looking at is based on the limited cash flow of the sewer utility itself. Once we receive the bond revenue, the bond, any of that that's not spent, that's in the bank account or in the actual funds, has to be classified as restricted. So in doing so, the timing of projects, the money came in early, the money hasn't been spent, and yes, the limited cash flow of the sewer utility, which does need a rate. We just got the rate increase and it hasn't quite, it's only been in effect for it'll only be in effect for 11 months this year. So with the timing of the year end, the restricted designation of those bond funds put us into a negative situation for financial statement purposes. The cash is there, the cash flow is there, but the designation of where it falls at year end led us to the whole conversation about we don't want to present a set of financial statements that show negative
Right.
cash for the year. And yeah, I'm gonna defer to Jody and just speak for a little bit on that. And what we came up with is our solution to the situation.
Yeah, so the sewer utility has cash on hand. It's not that it's negative per se in total, but there are certain amounts that have to be reported as in separately in the financial statements as restricted related to the bond. So the reserve account, the redemption account, and that unspent money. And then there are other balances that historically have been reported separate as designated. So I think of it kind of like if I said, well, I'm going to put money aside for a special project. I'm going to kind of keep track of how much I've set there, but it's not legally restricted. It's just a best practice tracking. And so these amounts were designated and set aside, have historically been reported that way, but because of the overall cash flow, what it results is that I'll say the remaining cash has gone negative. And so really what I proposed, or I said to Crystal, is you just need to, as a group, figure out how to relabel some of that so that we zero out that negative number and basically reduce the amounts that have been set aside for these special purposes. And so that's what she's kind of done here, rather than wiping out, I think the connection fees, because that was not being used anymore, combining that in with the general check cash account, and then the others doing kind of a proportionate decrease. And so this would purely be for the reporting at the end of 2022. And then with these designated funds, you would be able to have a discussion of what really are the right funding, what do we want money set aside for,
And at what level?
and at what level, and determine that before the end of 2023, and then that could be updated for the 2023 reporting.
Are we confident that cleaning out the connection fee fund is appropriate?
Most entities that I've worked with don't keep it in a designated fund. They keep it in there, they track it possibly for their purposes like I think you have done. But no, not all of them keep them as set-aside designated funds. A lot of it just, those connection fees come into the general funds for the operations and set aside when there's, usually if it's a specific project in a specific area.
So this was not a designated for a specific project, I guess?
Not that I could find in the history, and I did look at the others too, and money's just been going in there to support future replacements, these replacement funds. I can't find anywhere where there's designated, okay, we have prices on these things, we're going to set aside money for these specific things. And one thing I will do before the end of the year is look at those and comparative to the DNR's required reserve.
The DNR replacement fund is separate from these. so
Right, but
that-
it's underfunded, so I'm looking at these thinking, well, these should probably be part of that.
Okay.
So we'll
For
look at that.
2023?
For 2023, because they weren't put in, it's underfunded from what is set in the analysis to show what should be in that fund.
Okay.
So that fund is low, and these funds are high. So we will look to possibly combine these into a replacement fund, and we can even keep them separate by names. They are different bank accounts. The connection fees are specifically in a bank account. I did bring a statement for you, so you can see these are actually in a separate savings account, the connection fees.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, some people do and some people don't.
Right.
It's a choice.
Yeah, no, I don't with my designated funds, but,
And I think with some of these accounts as well, as you said, that deposits have been going in, but I'm not sure over the last several years how much has been tracked of, oh, we did buy a vehicle, or we did do maintenance on a vehicle, we can utilize that money. I think that may not have been always tracked. So I think
Okay.
that's why I would say taking a fresh look at what do you feel is the appropriate amount for different purposes to have on hand makes
Because basically,
sense.
it's been funded from operations and taken from general cash and set aside
instead of using the funds.
instead of using them for operations, because the cash of the fund always had cash. There was always a cash flow. So no one really paid attention, oh, we're putting a lot over here, let's stop and leave it at that level. Quit putting money in there, we need it for our operations. So,
So one of the goals that we had for Nick when he starts to make sure that all the departments have a capital plan, as we start budgeting for 2024 and take a look at these restricted fund balances, are we going to be looking at what needs to be replaced and start putting appropriate monies away if we need to increase any funds? I mean, for example,
Yeah, that's
fleet
what the DNR
management.
chart will help us with. And I just got it to Nick today. There's a
Okay.
DNR chart. It lists out years that the assets were purchased, how long they should live. So we have our basis to start with to do that exactly.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yep.
And this is going to be a good opportunity.
Thanks to this gal,
with-
she got it to me.
With the transition of coming from city over to the utility, this is a good time just to kind of roadmap things out, get
Yep.
things situated, and go forward with it, so.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for all working together and planning that out. So we need to decide if we are approving the redesignation of the funds that are listed here to unrestricted assets, right? Unrestricted funds, sorry. Does anybody have questions about that? Okay.
No, I appreciate the explanations.
May I ask how how you have it worded?
We don't have it worded yet.
Okay, because my interjection here would be if you are going to temporarily or permanently not classify connection fees. So the balance that you have at year end, there was an additional $947.91 of interest since then. So the balance of the actual fund is a little bit higher. So if you're going to dismiss that designated designation for connection fees, then we wouldn't need to state anything further.
So
On
in
the
other
total.
words, you're looking for permission to totally close the connection fee designation fund?
For the time being, yes.
Yep.
For as long as you see fit, use the funds, get all the others in place for reserve funds, look at, make sure all your reserve funds are balanced out for where you want them to be.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion.
So let me see if I get this motion correct, so, and Michelle start writing.
And one more note, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. So the other three, as we're reclassifying specific dollar amounts for year end.
Right.
These balances, as they are currently, will not be touched. The money's not moving. Just wanted you to know, I actually have the list of specific accounts. It's all in. They are not being touched. You're not moving money. The only one I would suggest is we take care of that connection fees. So your designation for the other three is just for classification for financial statement purposes. And then for year-end 2023, we will look to look at the rest of the work and decide if we need to do any more.
Okay, so the motion, as I understand it, is, I'm wondering if we need to do this in multiple parts.
Well, I'm wondering, can we do, to reclassify wastewater designated funds to unrestricted funds for financial purposes?
This is, which,
And close the connection fee fund.
but I think we should state out the amount coming from the main replacement, the pump replacement, and the vehicle
I
replacement.
think that would be best if you
Yeah.
stated it in your,
So my understanding, can we do the motion in multiple parts? I think it'd be easier for people.
I think if you split it.
So the
All right.
first motion would be to close the connection fee designated fund and move the the designated balance to unrestricted.
Okay, wait, to close the connection fees fund.
Do you want to state as of 12/31/22?
And
Yes.
you said, and move the balance.
And the balance is 273,942.
So to move the balance of 273,942 to
Unrestricted
unrestricted
as of 12/31/22.
Didn't she say there was more with interest?
No, if you do that right there, if you close it permanently, it takes care of everything. Because that's as of that date. So the classification of this piece of interest, we're still in 2023, it's not, it's automatically not restricted.
So
Because she
the-
said to close it.
The first one is to close the connection fees fund and move the balance 273,942 to unrestricted as of 12/31/23.
22.
Oh, jeez.
It's okay.
I have 22 written down.
She said 23.
But is that the first?
Yes.
Okay, so that's going to be the first motion.
And I'm happy to make that first motion on that. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Sandy. Can we get a roll call on that, Michelle?
Yep. Curtis,
Aye.
Moda,
Aye.
Andler. Rule.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Then the second piece of business is to move from the main replacement fund $57,934.25 to the unrestricted fund as of 12/31/22. And to move from the pump replacement designated fund $39,594.65 to the unrestricted fund as of 12/31/22, and to move from the vehicle replacement designated fund $55,081.10 to the unrestricted fund as of 12/31/22. Again, I'll make the first motion on that one.
I will second that.
Thank you, Reagan. Can we get a roll call?
Yep. Right? Rule,
Aye.
Andler. Motive,
Aye.
Curtis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies. We appreciate the detailed explanations. Okay, next we move on to the wastewater building boiler system.
So yeah, there was a estimate for repair or replacement of the filter at the boiler at the wastewater treatment facility. And after the inspection, it was found that the boiler had some significant damage, where it was brought to Katie's attention that it was now become an emergency situation. It couldn't be brought to the 2024 budget. So what you're being presented here is one quote. And the reason why one quote was only given is we typically also deal with Sabo, and they were unable to give a quote in time. They were on vacation, I believe, is what was happening. And we're not able to provide a quote. I did talk to Jason, city engineer, to ask him about 1901, because that was the first time I heard of them. And they are a very reputable company or business to work with. With the new boilers that are requested to be put in or presented to be put in, these are three, it's not one big industrial boiler like there is now. And what this does is it gives you more capability of having to be able to modulate between the boilers, the parts, and inspection and maintenance on them are much cheaper. The lead times on the parts will be less, and the overall the efficiency of the boilers will improve. I've taken a look at a few other documents that were provided. One was the limited or the warranty, and there is because this is in an industrial setting, it's not going to be the 15-year limited warranty that they would have if it was in a residential setting. So what it is a 10-year limited warranty. It's 10 years on the heat exchanger and the tank, and then it's a 1-year warranty on all the other parts. But like I stated before, because this is 3 residential boiler systems, the cost of the parts are going to be much cheaper instead of, a big expense that you would see with one industrial boiler. I think that's all I got. So yeah, we're just looking to be able to proceed with the replacement of that. I did look into opportunities, I guess, as far as, we have an IGA with Fall River. This piece of equipment doesn't
Do you want to let
qualify.
everybody know what an IGA is?
It's an interconnection governmental agreement between Fall River. So they connected into our system. There's an agreement. The percentage of capacity that they have agreed to based on flow is 12.3%. The only way we have a designated fund for Fall River, and the only way that we're able to collect money from that fund, we received $1.5 million from them. I think it was 2000 and a while ago. And there's stipulations of how you can pull money from those accounts. And one of those stipulations is there needs to be notification to Fall River. There needs to be a bond issuance for the capital investment. And because of the value of the boiler, not that $100,000 isn't a lot of money, but if you would go for a bond issuance, the amount that we would get from the 12.3% is what it would cost to file for a bond issuance, and then you have interest to deal with. So it's not, and I did speak to Jason as well on these matters, and he agrees with not pushing for that. What that is intended for are big capital improvement projects, like the clarifier decks, or the dryer. So we're gonna be looking at those steps to be taken, so that way we're making sure that both Columbus and Fall River are paying their equal shares of the treatment facility.
What is the total cost on this again?
Total cost is $95,949.68.
I don't think we have a choice. I mean, we need this. Reagan, do you have thoughts?
Echo yours. I don't think there's much of a choice, and I appreciate Nick's explanation of the fund account on that part too, so, yeah.
Brooke?
Is this,
So, yeah, that would
This
be the
would be
new
a
setting.
new
Yep,
setting,
I
okay.
should have stated that.
okay. Yeah, it, unfortunately
Okay.
needs to be done.
And another reason we're trying to push for this is there's gonna be lead times on, this equipment. We're getting into we're gonna be in the winter months before we know it. There's some vital equipment that's in there, that we need to protect, and that's the situation we're in right now.
Sandy, do you have thoughts or questions?
The climate we live in, I don't know that we have a choice.
Right. Okay. So with that said, do we have a motion to approve the purchase of the new boiler system for the wastewater treatment plant at a cost of $95,000?
$949.68.
Thank you. 95, 949, 68.
I'll make a motion that we buy or get a new boiler system at the cost of $95,949.68.
Thank you, Brooke. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Sandy. And then we need roll call.
Rule,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Motive,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have the 2024 CWL budget discussion. Woo-hoo.
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't here for assembling this, but what Michelle has presented is a rough, and we say rough with being all seriousness with this, is the initial start of what we're looking at for the budget for the capital projects and additions. I don't think there's anything that needs to be, addressed at this time. If there's line items that you guys are wanting more information, I can provide that with. Otherwise, if you'd like, I can go through the line items that are being presented to you at this time. With that Bobcats, I'll just point out a few key ones. The Bobcat skid steer for the combined utility needs. So what the idea is right now, there's skid loader lease agreements out there, and the initial cost up front is for purchasing a new one, and then the years after, you're in a $2,500 a year lease agreement, and every year you get a new skid loader. This saves on wear and tear of your equipment because you're getting a new one every year. It saves you on maintenance. It saves you on a lot of issues that you see 5-10 years down the road when you start putting a lot of money back in the equipment. And the other idea behind this too is for the trade-in value to then be, it's my understanding, we haven't gone over the sewer budget yet, but the sewer department is getting a skid loader. For the sewer then to purchase at the trade-in value of the current skid loader that's there, and then we'd be looking at for future budgets to then enroll wastewater into the same lease program. So that's the idea behind that. Just trying to think of any big key items that you guys, the iPads, that's for, we have additional employees now that don't have access to iPads and the mapping. Mapping's important with what our staff does out in the field. So that was to get some additional iPads to be in the trucks so they can use the GIS systems. The concrete saw, we have a existing
Thank you,
concrete
Crystal.
saw that has seen better days. And this one is going to be a steel chop saw with a cart and a water hookup, because often they have to do road openings for water main breaks and electrical upgrades or electrical fixes. And I can keep going. So you guys, are there things that you guys want pointed out, and maybe I'm just prolonging this commission meeting?
Does anybody have any questions for Nick on what's in front of us?
Was Katie getting the one that's at,
At the water and light, which is now utilities, yes.
okay,
And then Katie's budget will then reflect purchasing of that skid loader per our at trade-in value.
When I was listening to Jody talk about the audit, it struck me pretty hard that our reserves are going down. And I believe it's my understanding that sewer is in the same boat. I would love to see, I don't know about anybody else here if they support this, but I would like to see the reserves go back up to 2 to 3 months. If it's not possible to do 3 months in 1 year, if we can do 2 months this upcoming year and then make the third month the next year, but I would like to see a goal for that to happen.
And we talked today about when the timing of the electric rate implement, we were thinking of probably around April, so we'll get 3/4 of 2024 with the new rate, which will add additional funds, which we have that same goal.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And we should be fairly caught up with staffing now.
So I was actually to give that in my report, but I can do it now. So we presented an offer to a candidate for the wastewater treatment operator, and he has accepted. His name is Jeremy Roll. He's starting next week, Monday, so quickly. And we actually have another candidate that we will be interviewing in the next week. And this individual would be fully licensed and would fill that last position at the wastewater treatment plant, which would be very beneficial to that department. So we're happy to bring on Jeremy Roll, and we look forward to his start. And I'm sure Katie is very excited as well for Monday to roll around.
And we've caught our staff up pretty much to acceptable salary levels. We're not going to have to be worried about that other than typical COLA raises. Okay.
Yeah, and there's surveys out there that we've been looking at through our memberships through MUW and WPPI, and we're seeing utilities putting in, and we're going to have to look at our budget, but 5% cost of living is what has been shown on the survey. So we're going to take a look at what we can do and obviously present it to you guys. And but that's what's being presented right now in the surveys that we're receiving.
Yeah, the information I got was 5.1%, so it was right in the same. Yeah, okay. And then what is a reasonable time? I mean, I know you're not going to have a capital budget put together in full on all the departments in time for this budget, but what is a reasonable time you think on that?
I guess I would ask when it has been your typical month that you presented a full budget. I mean, we'll make it happen. So-
September is when they see the full with this and the expenses, and then October, so that's their first look at the draft. Then October, any kind of fluctuation or adjustments, suggestions, input, that gets implemented, and then usually by November, it's approved, and then it gets ratified by the city council after the commission approves it.
Nick, I would ask that you reach out to Chris Schwartz. The city has a timeline for when they introduce the budget as a whole to the council, and the utilities budget should go with that as well.
And I want to say that's in September or something.
I could look on my phone and tell you maybe when we're done.
It's a little bit earlier than ours, so.
Okay. We'll make sure it works.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Any questions?
I would just like to add that as we're working on the budget, that we not forget about the stormwater study that was done in 2022, and that we start working toward addressing the needs that were identified there. And I realize the stormwater budget is city, but we're also supposed to oversee stormwater here, so.
We are, and just as an update, I have been in touch with both Attorney Johnson and Jason Letha. They have some things that they've been working on for ordinance changes in conjunction with the study. Once they're ready with that, they'll bring it forward to the commission for us to review, and then the council. And we'll go from there and be able to outline the project from there. But they're not quite ready when I talked to them last month.
I would like to get it into
I
the
know.
budget if we can. It's, we keep paying for studies that we never do anything with. It's ridiculous use of money.
Okay, I think with that, we can move on to your full report, Nick.
Yeah, so I haven't been here long, so I've gathered some information from the staff on what has occurred in the last few weeks. For the electric department, they're continuing to work on the voltage conversions going on in town. The water treatment operator training they're continuing to do the water treatment operating training for Josh, Jeff, and Joe. As you know, they do the rotations with the water department. Project planning for future voltage conversions, tree trimming by tracks to clear overhead lines. They're making sure that they're maintaining their proper distance from the railroad, because there are requirements that the train railroad require you a notification, things like that. So they've been in touch with them with the work they're doing. Something that happened this morning that kind of woke us up right away. was we received an email regarding our customers who have interruptible agreement with WPPI Energy. And we have 2 customers that are in that agreement. This is a new, something new for me. We didn't have any customers where I previously came from that were part of this agreement. And what it means is, through the agreement, in a case of high demand days like today with how hot it is, they reach out to these customers to let them know that we're asking you to shed load to accommodate for the grid so that we don't have to take big outages for the communities. And so we have 2 customers that are part of that agreement, and the email is what was quoted there today, Thursday, 8/24/2023. Conditions are such that there is the possibility there will be a mandatory instruction to reduce electricity. No action was taken today. So it was just a heads up that there's the potential of this happening, but in the end, it didn't have to happen.
May I ask, does it make sense to reach out to each of those customers, since they're very large, and
Yep.
understand what their backup system is?
We do, and Anna, our
ESM.
Our ESM is the point on that. She is very active. She goes over their agreements on a yearly basis. And, you know, she gets the key contacts for each of those. So it's a very smooth communication process.
Okay, and they have a generator backup or
Yes,
something?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and then through the agreement, they get, you know, financial incentive to do this.
Okay.
And it was just another reminder for us and the staff to go over any emergency response plans that might be out there, like the load shedding plan that would be more extreme measure on top of just the interconnected or interruptible customers.
Yeah.
So it was a good reminder for us to look at what's currently in place here at the utilities. At the water department, they are finished with flushing hydrants. They did say that there's 5 hydrants left. I think they're working on, I don't know if there's parts that need to be adjusted with before they can do flushing on that. Their backflow testing at the shop at both water plants, 823, booster pump maintenance at both water plants. And they're attempting to locate and figure out where house services were put in on Richmond Street for future construction. At the wastewater facility, they're televising sewer for upcoming road projects for Jason, prep work for their upcoming DNR inspections. As you already heard, the Jeremy Roll is starting next week, Monday, and the tentative wastewater operator interview the following week. They've also received the National Association of Clean Water Agency Gold Award. And what this is you need to achieve 100% compliance for the year. This is the second year in a row. If you get 4 years in a row, you can then go for the Platinum Award, I'm pretty sure. So bravo to the staff there at Wastewater Treatment Plant for being able to achieve that.
Absolutely.
Administration, this is, we had disconnect notices were given out. Disconnects were this week. With the extremely high temperatures, we were not able to disconnect those customers, obviously for health reasons. There were only 32 disconnects. That's a pretty fair number, but not over what typically see here at Columbus. And then, if you haven't heard already, our utility website has changed to match the branding change that has happened here at the utilities. You will still be directed to Columbus Utilities, WI.com, if you do still type in Columbus Water and Light. And then our emails have changed to reflect that domain change.
And those have been forwarded as well for a temporary period?
Yep, so we did a year temporary period.
Great.
And it's a very low cost to do that, so that's all I have.
And then I see Jake's email that was in here. Is there anything that we should know about the email, or is this just general?
That was information that he wanted to share with the commission.
Okay, we'll tell him thank you.
I will do that.
I did have a question on it, though. It was a series of breaks that happened. And is that because, why was that? Is the infrastructure that old and that fragile, or what's going on there?
Depending on, and I don't have a lot of historic information on that specific road, just with how recently I've been here, but what typically happens with a water main break is you have to isolate that section of the street. By closing a valve, you then put pressure on other close by, stresses on the system. When you have main breaks like this, there is the potential of a series of main breaks that can occur. And I don't know if that is reflective of the age of the system. I can't give you that answer at this time, but I would assume that would be the case.
Okay, and do we have a valve exercising schedule? Okay,
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this took 35 hours for them to repair?
Yeah, that was the first time we had a break in that area, and a 10-inch, that's a big, that's 6-inch wide, them are big pipes.
Yeah.
And it just, they turned off one valve and turned on another, and it blew. Well, you even came over here, were you here for that?
Materials.
Yeah, so they had to get materials, because them are materials, we don't keep,
So.
we keep very limited, I should say.
So were those poor guys working straight for 35 hours, I guess is what I'm,
They did do shifts, but the majority, yeah.
Nick
like-
is smiling.
Yeah.
So we will be addressing as employees rotating out through big operations like this. The reason it took so long, the guys did a great job. They worked through all hours of the day and night to get it up and running. But we ultimately want to protect our staff and make sure they're not over exerting themselves and setting themselves up for safety issues. But the reason for the long outage or water main break and fix was the valve did not close. There's a lot of water coming through. They had to consistently or constantly be pumping that hole out to be able to fix it, coordinate with getting materials. It was a domino effect that just,
And there was certain equipment we didn't have. We had to call Forest Construction in to help. So then you have to wait, you're waiting for the emergency locate, and then you're waiting for equipment, and then you're waiting for parts, and before you know it, it's quite a long night.
well, I'm thankful to our staff for being so dedicated and putting in that kind of time to solve this problem. Okay, does anybody have any questions for either Nick or Michelle? Okay, then we'll move on. Does anybody have any requests for future agenda topics? Okay. Stormwater stuff, yep. Okay, with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Sandy. Do we have a second?
I'll say.
Thank you, Brooke. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.